Hello, hello, everyone. I am Charli Penn. I'm the lifestyle director over at Essence Magazine. I'm here with a very, very special guest today who I'll tell you all about in a moment. But come on in, get cozy, cozy up to this fireside chat. We're about to have a really necessary and important conversation about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. I know you'll want to hear all about it from the executive level on down. So come on in, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Participants, I see you.
Yeah.
Welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Hello. I'll give everybody a minute to get going. All right, Natalie, let's do it. Okay.
Right.
So look, everyone, honestly, a lack of diversity has real costs. Studies have shown that businesses with gender, ethnic, racial, and racial diversity at the executive level are more likely to have above average profitability and outperform the competition. But we know that diversity on its own is not enough. Inclusion is just as, if not more, important. Research shows that employees who work with managers who foster an inclusive environment are 17% more likely to report that they are high performing, 17, and 29% more likely to report behaving collaboratively. Love it. Put simply, diverse and inclusive businesses drive more innovation, they retain employees, they attract top-tier talent, and they hit many other metrics that lead to long-term and sustainable growth, which is what we all want. But to be successful, diversity and inclusion has to be a top to bottom business strategy, not just an HR program, right? So to dive into a really thoughtful conversation today on this topic, which is so important, I'm super excited to be joined by Natalie Brown, the Director of Corporate Citizenship at Ally Financial. She has nearly a decade, y'all, of experience in developing diverse recruiting strategies, implementing diversity-related executive programs, and putting D&I learning solutions into action. Welcome, Natalie.
Hey, thank you. Nice to be here.
It's
So
so
happy
great.
to have this conversation.
I know, and we're so great to have you here having it with us because you know your stuff, and let's get down to business. You ready?
Okay. All right.
Okay. So we know that, diversity takes on many forms, right? Including, but not limited to race, gender, age, ability, and sexual orientation. But as so many of us know, and we've all experienced firsthand, a diverse workforce isn't necessarily an inclusive one. What does it mean to be a truly inclusive company?
Well, first, let me say, at Ally, we feel like fostering a sense of belonging is when you really hit the mark with inclusivity, right? So being an inclusive company means that you're celebrating the differences of all your employees, right? And helping them to feel like they belong to the company, that they have a stake in what the company's mission and vision is and how they're serving their customers. It's a big thing for us around diversity and inclusion and this sense of belonging here at Ally. Culture is the number one thing that, one of the number one things that our CEO talks about when he's talking to our employees. And it's really threaded in everything that we do. And so when you're really trying to be a truly inclusive company, you really have to take the walk, and it's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint, on helping employees feel like they belong, helping them to feel like they have a stake in the game with you.
Which is really important, right? That belonging. We'll get to that, and we'll really dive in with that because I think that is so key. And research has also shown, right, that businesses with gender, ethnic, and racial diversity at the executive level, right, let's talk about the top, are more likely to have above average profitability and outperform the competition, which winning. So what are some of the ways that diversity and inclusion drive results?
Well, for us, I think we think about driving results when employees feel like they belong, when there's inclusivity, when there's diversity in thought and differences and experiences, employees become more productive. Like I said, they have a stake in what you're doing. We have employee resource groups. We have 8 employee resource groups where 37% of our employees are participants in that group. Some of them are participants in the group because they have an affiliation with that group. For example, I'm in the African American ERG, but however, the Black African American ERG, but I'm also in Aliados, which is our Latina and Hispanic ERG, right? And so, although I'm not from that heritage, I'm an ally for them. And so that's one of the things that I think, is an important part of driving results. When our employees feel that they belong, they're productive, they have a stake in the game. We also have done some partnerships, or have partnerships with organizations like the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, the Association of Latino Professionals of America, Alpha. And through those partnerships, what we're finding is we're also creating that diverse pipeline coming into our company, right? Again, driving for results. We have I'll give you an example. We do a program called Moguls in the Making with Thurgood Marshall College Fund in collaboration with them and Big Sean with the Sean Anderson Foundation. Everybody loves Big Sean. And so through that entrepreneur pitch competition that we do, we have students that come across all HBCUs, 50 students, go through this weekend, and then they get, some of them that win the competition get guaranteed internships with us. We had a group last summer, who, as a part of their program or part of their internship, created a middle school curriculum around financial literacy that we are going to launch in 2021. And so through these efforts of exposing students to moguls, allowing them the opportunity to get vital skills that they can use at Ally on their own or wherever they choose to go, we're also driving results because now we had a gap. We didn't have a middle school targeted financial education curriculum. Now in 2021, we will have one because of these students. So I think about that in terms of how we're driving results. I think about the work that we're doing now around social equity and making sure that we're looking at the products and services that we offer to make sure that we're reaching a broad group of consumers. So those things to me drive results. And when you have those voices in the room, at the top, in the middle, and the bottom, right? Then those results can happen and can happen fairly quickly because now you have diversity in the room that's coming from various perspectives. And I think it's important for all companies really to take a stake and listen to their employees, hear what they have to say, let them be your consumer in many cases so that you are driving to the results and to the mission that you've outlined for your company.
I love that you really emphasize the relationship between the executive level and then that student and intern level pipeline, right? And having that pipeline and then having people at the top to be able to recognize talent that's already working with the company. And I love
Absolutely. That. Yeah, I mean, our interns, when they come into Ally, they do a presentation at the end of the summer, and our C-suite executives are participating in those presentations, whether it's the chief compliance officer looking at, the presentations from his interns. Our mobile interns had pretty much a lot of the C-suite, including the CEO. And at the end of their presentation, he said, how do we make this happen? How do we go forward? And so when they get a chance to hear, I think they get inspired by the young minds that they're hearing from. And then we also do our own internal hackathon with our own employees, right? In our IT space, which is fantastic because that's driving innovation, that's driving opportunities for us to be better stewards of our what our mission is, and that is to serve and do it right for our customers.
Absolutely. And, of course, right, to be successful, we know diversity and inclusion has to be a top to bottom business strategy.
Yes.
Not just an HR program, right? We talk about this time and time again. So how can entrepreneurs, founders, and small business owners write diversity into their business plan to create inclusive companies from the ground up?
Well, I think it starts with having a diverse workforce, right? I think you have to look and have the conversation with your employees, your diverse employees, whether they're people of color or women, LGBTQ, veterans. So when you think about the strength that comes into a company from the experiences, personal and professional, that your employees bring, that's really how you can drive a culture of inclusion and really start embarking on how you can make your company better, how you can move your company to a sense of belonging versus, to your point, just having an HR program. And so
Right.
I think that's an important step for companies and entrepreneurs as well, looking at your supply chain. How are you doing business with diverse suppliers, women-owned suppliers, minority-owned suppliers? And if that's an opportunity for you, even as a small business, whoever you buy your cups and plates for your restaurant, or who's servicing you in terms of, whatever you're embarking on, those are things that are important. And that's how you can really start from the ground up of getting in and starting this journey of D&I.
Really thinking about every aspect of your business. I love that.
Yes.
Now, you guys, if you have any questions for Natalie, please leave them in the Q&A box. We're going to leave 5 minutes at the end to be sure we get to all of your questions. So go ahead and start putting them in there. I'll be sure to grab all of them at the end. So just ask away. Okay, so Natalie, you mentioned belonging, right? We talked about getting back there. So studies have shown that diversity initiatives fall short because they don't necessarily lead to a sense of belonging, right? How can businesses do better and foster work environments where employees of all backgrounds feel included, involved, and accepted? We want to feel that way at work. So how do we do that?
Yeah, I think, we think about diversity and inclusion in a broad definition, right? Not just people of color. And I mentioned just a few minutes ago, our military, folks with disabilities, our women's ERG, our Black professionals, generational ERG that we have, right? So looking at the diversity of different generations, I'm old school, right? So I'm a 70s, early 70s baby. And so different way of working and thinking than our millennial population, right? Folks that I manage. And so I think that looking across the spectrum, creating opportunities where you have employee resource groups is one way to target that. I also think as we look at our ERGs, we have focus months. So we have months for each ERG where they can celebrate and talk about their differences, hold panel discussions. During Hispanic Heritage Month, they did a cooking show to learn about different foods that happened, in that community, which was awesome.
Amazing.
And so, just amazing types of things. It brings collaboration and learning across them. I think the other thing that we've learned through this journey is that each of our diversity and inclusion pillars, we have a community outreach pillar, which my team in corporate citizenship supports. There's a development pillar, there's a talent pillar, and there's a business connectivity pillar. So how are we connecting to the business with the work that we're doing? In that regard, I think having those pillars across that ERG platform and across our D&I platform really helps address all the key things that we feel are important to move the needle forward. And if companies can start down that path, knowing that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, it takes time. But the first step is bringing in your employees, having conversations with them, figuring out how you can build this inclusive environment and what they're looking for. As employees from you as an employer, what's important to them.
And speaking of what's important, so I work at Essence, right? We nickname it Black Girl Magic headquarters.
Right.
So I get to show up every day as my authentic self to work, right? But that's not always the case for everyone. And, especially diverse audiences, diverse workers. So, studies have also shown that employees who feel that they can't be their authentic self at work have lower workplace satisfaction, which we get, find less meaning in their work, which is sad, and have one foot out the door, which is bad for business and bad for the company. So what steps can businesses take to really encourage employees to be their most authentic selves at work and avoid these pitfalls?
Well, of course, in this environment that we're in today, that can be very challenging, right? We're talking about, we have some tough topics going on in our country right now around race and being equitable and systemic racism. And so I think what steps companies can take is thinking about how to have a conversation with your employees. So at Ally this summer, we hosted and facilitated these Let's Talk About It sessions, where we had employees from all over the company that could join these Let's Talk About It sessions. They could talk about what this impact has had on them in terms of the George Floyd incident. And, you know, it really was a deep conversation, and it was educational for many of our employees. The other thing I would say is that we had such an overwhelming response to that that we had to create more of them. And we end up having our ERGs to help leaders to help facilitate them. And then I facilitated them. Most importantly, our C-suite was in the room, from our CEO to every chief title that we had to our middle managers were in the room. So creating that and fostering that authentic conversation is one step. I also think we have to make sure that our managers are trained on how to build an inclusive team. They're trained on unconscious bias. We all have a bias. If you have a brain, you have a bias. The thing I say all the time is, if you don't think you have a bias, then let me know if you like Chick-fil-A or Arby's, right? Or Popeyes or Chick-fil-A, right? If you think about the things that you like, right? You know, some things you're like, I'm never going to Hardee's and get a hamburger. I'm going to Five Guys, right? So
that's a bias.
Right, or White Castle, or wherever you're from, where you can get a good. Everybody has a bias around something. So how do you train your managers around that and making sure that they also are checking their biases, right? Pulling it in, thinking about when you're recruiting, the tools that you can use, having diverse slates, diverse interview panels, some of the things that we've been doing and continue to do to make sure that we're fostering this and that our employees can feel like they can bring their whole selves to work, especially women of color. When we could have braids, we could have locks, we can have straight hair, we can have curly hair. You know, that's new for some cultures and new in corporate America in terms of how authentic we have become compared to when I started over 20 years ago in corporate America. And I think we have to embrace that, but we have to educate at the same time that this is who we are and we should be able to come to work as we are. So.
Because it makes us happier. And
it does. It does.
It's done. Everybody wins.
Exactly. I'm turning this light on because I feel like my green screen is going out. There we go.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
So let's talk about, so addressing, underrepresentation at different leadership levels. You've been saying it. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It takes time. But change can happen within organizations right now. How can managers today focus on creating environments that really demonstrate, value for individuals from underrepresented backgrounds and demographics?
Yeah, I think, we've been trying to make a number of changes when it comes to our diversity and inclusion efforts. Our chief diversity officer is amazing, and working in this space prior to coming to Ally and seeing how quickly and fast Ally has moved the needle on diversity and inclusion has been exciting to me and very rewarding. Being a part of the conversation, but also being with a company that really values it and is true to it. So I think as a part of that, if managers really focusing on when they're recruiting, leveraging their teams and the networks of their teams to find diverse talent, right? Because we all have our own network. And I just had this conversation the other day and I said, look, if you want diverse talent, go to the diverse people who have the network where that talent is. Create opportunities where you have referral programs, where your employees can refer. Leverage your employee resource groups to help you recruit. We do that. We have some employee resource groups that will go out with Clemson to Clemson or to North Carolina A&T, where I'm an alum, or other places, and help recruit diverse talent. And so having those diverse interview panels, having those diverse slates is also helpful in that regard. So I think you have to bring people in and you have to leverage the power of your diverse employees to help bring more diverse employees in your organization. And the other thing I would say is, if you have diversity at the top of the house, I think those leveraging the power of your existing diverse leaders, making sure that they know where the talent is in the organization, reaching out, creating opportunities for them to get to know the diverse talent is also important.
Absolutely. And when we think about, environment, right, and managers, research also shows that employees who work with managers who foster an inclusive environment, right, are 17% more likely to report that they're high performing. These numbers are, irrefutable, and 29% more likely to report behaving collaboratively. So, what advice would you have that they can share for leaders who are cultivating a more inclusive work environment? How do they do that?
How do they do that? Yeah, well, first, I think it starts with education,
Yeah.
right? Educating your leaders, spending a lot of time on training, the unconscious bias, microaggressions, and really helping leaders understand what those are and what that means. Not a knock on if you've done something wrong, but more about so you're more self-aware and self-conscious as a leader, how you're performing, and the decisions that you're making, that there's not bias in those decision-making activities. The other thing is, I think you have to celebrate employee differences. You really have to make sure that you're celebrating their differences, whether it's through an ERG network, some other kind of network that's going on in your company. You have to listen to employees, give them a voice, whether it's an employee engagement survey, whether it's creating a let's talk about it session where employees get to talk about how they feel on certain topics. You've got to listen to them. Oftentimes, employers could use focus groups on products and services and have a diverse group of members in that focus group to help them as they're innovating. And then lastly, I would say you really have to communicate your goals and measure your progress and let employees know where you are in that journey. And so I think the more transparent you are about diversity and inclusion and where you are on that journey, then I think the more you can get the trust of your employees as well as the buy-in so that they can help you get to the goal that you're trying to reach.
I love that you emphasize transparency, right?
Yes.
Making an open conversation for the team. That's a great way to look at it. And it definitely will encourage belonging and make people feel supported.
Absolutely. I mean, we have an open door policy here at Ally, which is amazing. And so from our interns to our senior leaders, if you want to get on the calendar of someone in the C-suite, it's an open door policy. You certainly can do that.
That's wonderful. And, so this conversation that we're having is important, right? This is something we all want to see more of, we care about, we want to know that change will continue. So how can we, the people, right, continue to hold businesses accountable and further drive change?
I think change, like Sam Cooke said, change is going to come. I think change is coming, right? We're in the midst of change right now, from everything that's happening in the world today to, what's happening in corporate America and in companies, even with small business companies. I think it is important for companies to really think about creating lasting change, have courage, step out, and because you're stepping out on doing the right thing. It's one thing to step out on something that's not right. You're stepping out on doing the right thing. There's nothing better than having a sense of belonging when you're working for a company, or an employee who feels like they belong, an employee that feels like they have a stake in the success of the company, and contributing to the work of that company. So I say, have courage. I say, step out, be a leader. Be a leader in the conversation.
Take action.
Take action. Yes.
So we have some great questions coming in.
Okay.
I'll share some with you. You're going to love this one. This one is from Mercy. She says, how do you promote inclusivity, right, within your company without making it look performative? And that is a good one. Without making it look
performative. Oh, yeah. Well, look, I think what's special about Ally, this is company number 7 for me. So let me just put that on the table. If you go to LinkedIn, you'll say she can keep a job. So I've been around the block a minute. Mm-hmm. What's different, I think, that we've created or that we've tried to create here is it's not just what we're measuring, it's how we're feeling as well. It's how employees are feeling about working at this company. So the employee engagement survey, yes, gives us some data points. Retention gives us some data points as well. But when you talk to people, when you are in the office, when we were in the office and you're at the break in the break room, I think that is when and people feel respected and feel and celebrating each other's differences. I think our ERGs do a fantastic job of doing that, which helps. And us taking the step to have the let's talk about it conversations about the George Floyd situation. I think that I was going to say something else, but I'll that unfortunate incident, which as a mother and a woman and a woman of color, just it's heartbreaking. But I think what we also find is that when employees can talk about these types of situations, when employees can participate in employee resource groups that are celebrating these differences, I've learned a lot about the Hispanic community being a part of that ERG. And when we had a session and they were playing a game and they were saying stuff in Spanish, and I was like, hey, for the person who doesn't know Spanish, can I get a translator, right? And so, and now I'm learning, right? I'm learning, and picking up on different words and learning about their culture. And it does make you feel like you belong. And then what happens is when people are socializing at events through the company, they get to know each other on a more personal level. Oh, I didn't know you had 2 kids. I have 2 kids. I have a daughter in high school.
Yeah.
It just organically, the inclusiveness starts to happen because people don't see you for the position that you hold. They see you for the person that you are in that position. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference in how you drive inclusion over time. It's organic for sure.
Yeah. And, I think if you're, like they say, if you're passionate about it, that passion will show, which is what you're showing us right now. It'll be consistently throughout everything that you do.
Absolutely.
We have another one here. How can we encourage white company owners with all white teams to hire people of color?
Well, it's tough, but you gotta get them out their comfort zone, right? It's, it is good to be uncomfortable for the right reason.
I'm back. I'm sorry.
It's okay. You're back. That's all right. we waited for you. No, I was just making sure that if anyone had any last questions they wanted to ask. Let's see. I have one for you if you can hear us, Natalie.
Yes.
I'm finishing up my undergrad and I'm looking for companies to work for soon. Inclusivity is important to me and I believe should be important to every company, but is unfortunately not. Is there anything that I should be looking for when applying to jobs? That's a good one.
Yeah, I think, what I always did was when I was applying to jobs, I was looking at their D&I, their culture, things about their culture that they may show. I was reading any articles around them and things that they've said or come out with about diversity and inclusion. That was important to me. How they're giving back to the community, the ways that they're giving back to the community, I think is important, because I think when you think about that, that ties into culture and how they care about their community. And so I certainly feel like making sure you're doing your homework on those companies, making sure that you are digging into what they've been saying about diversity and inclusion, what programs do they have, where they're putting their dollars in terms of supporting D&I efforts. That to me, I think is where you can find a company that aligns to your core values. The value system is important when you're looking for a company as far as I'm concerned. I want to make sure our values align. I want to make sure that we are in sync with each other and have the same core values.
I love that. And you know what, guys, that's what Natalie's saying. Do your research. Don't be afraid to do your research. Your core values, like she's saying, you want them to be aligned. Make sure that the company you're applying to is. I love that.
Yeah.
Natalie,
I do a lot of homework.
We can't see you, but we can hear the gems. So don't feel bad.
Okay. I'm working on it. I don't know what happened.
It's okay. No, you have really, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. It's never enough to talk about this over and over and over again. Thank you for holding space for it. Thank you, Ally. You all are doing incredible things. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching and coming to this fireside chat with Natalie and I. I hope it was a meaningful conversation for you. It sure was for me. Thank you, Natalie. Thanks, everyone.